At a certain point, many people find themselves caught in a peculiar kind of paralysis. You wake up with energy, maybe even excitement, and your mind immediately floods with possibilities. You could learn that language you've been thinking about, start that business idea, write that book, learn to paint, get in shape, reconnect with old friends, travel somewhere new. The list unfolds endlessly, each item glittering with potential, and you feel that familiar surge of anticipation. But then something strange happens. As the day progresses, you find yourself doing none of these things, not because you're lazy. You can feel the energy moving through you, restless and seeking an outlet. Not because you lack time. Hours slip by while you scroll, reorganize your room, make elaborate plans in notebooks that you'll never open again. You're not relaxing or resting. You're suspended in a strange state of agitated immobility, wanting desperately to move in every direction at once, and therefore moving nowhere at all. And naturally, you become frustrated with yourself. You think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just pick something and do it? You make promises tomorrow will be different. You'll wake up early, make a schedule, commit to one thing. But tomorrow comes and you're back in the same place, staring at that infinite menu of possibilities, paralyzed by the weight of your own potential. But what if I told you that this paralysis isn't a personal failure at all, but something far stranger and more profound? You see, most of what we call laziness or lack of discipline is actually something else entirely. It's what the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called the dizziness of freedom. Kierkegaard understood something that modern self-help culture consistently misses. The problem isn't that you have too little motivation or too little freedom. The problem is that you have too much. In a world of unlimited possibilities where you could theoretically be or do anything, choice itself becomes a kind of torture. Think about it this way. If you walk into a restaurant and the menu has 3 items, you can make a decision relatively easily. You consider each option, you choose, you eat. But what if you walked into a restaurant where the menu had 10,000 items? Every cuisine imaginable, infinite variations, combinations you've never even thought of. At first, this might seem wonderful, so much freedom, so much potential. But very quickly, something shifts. How do you choose? How do you know which option is the right one? And more importantly, every choice you make eliminates 9,999 other possibilities. Every yes is 9,999 no's. This is what Kierkegaard was pointing at. The anguish of freedom isn't that we lack choices, it's that we have too many, and every choice we make is simultaneously an act of creation and an act of destruction. When you choose to learn Spanish, you're not just choosing Spanish. You're killing the possibility of learning French or Japanese, or becoming fluent in music instead of language. When you commit to starting a business, you're murdering the version of you that becomes a professor, or travels the world, or writes poetry. Every choice is a kind of death, and this is what's really happening when you feel that paralysis. You're not afraid of commitment or hard work. You're afraid of the immense weight of choosing, because choosing means accepting that you are finite. You cannot be everything. You cannot do everything. You cannot explore every path. To live one life means allowing 10,000 other lives to die unlived. And your psyche rebels against this. It wants to keep all possibilities alive. It wants to remain pure potential, hovering in that space where everything is still possible, where you haven't yet committed the crime of limitation. So you scroll, you reorganize, you make plans, all activities that feel productive, but don't actually require you to choose. You're like someone standing at a crossroads with 100 paths radiating outward, and you tell yourself you're considering your options, but really you're just refusing to step onto any path at all because the moment you do, 99 paths disappear forever. Let me give you an analogy that might make this clearer. Imagine a tree that's trying to grow. Now, a tree doesn't have unlimited energy or resources. It has a finite amount of life force, drawn up from its roots, converted from sunlight. And a young tree faces a crucial existential question. Where should it put its energy? It could try to grow branches in every direction, reaching for every available patch of sunlight. And for a while this might seem like the smart strategy. Maximum possibilities, maximum potential for growth. But here's what actually happens to a tree that tries to grow in every direction at once. It grows weak. The branches stay thin. None of them reach very high. The tree becomes more like a bush, sprawling but shallow, unable to compete with other trees that have chosen a direction and committed to it. Eventually, such a tree often dies young because it never developed the strength to weather storms or reach the light above the canopy. The trees that survive and thrive are the ones that make a choice. They sense where the strongest light is coming, and they commit. They put most of their energy into growing tall in that direction. Yes, this means they're not reaching toward the light on the other side. Yes, this means they're accepting limitation, but this limitation is what allows them to actually become something. To reach heights a sprawling tree never could. To develop deep roots and thick bark and the strength to endure. This is what's happening when you want to do everything but feel stuck. You're trying to be the sprawling tree, keeping every possibility alive, and what you're actually doing is ensuring that none of them receive enough energy to manifest into reality. And this period of recognizing this pattern can last quite a while. I must warn you about something. Understanding this intellectually doesn't immediately solve the problem. You might read these words and think, yes, that's exactly what's happening. Now I'll just choose something and commit. But when you sit down to actually choose, you'll likely find that the terror returns. Because choosing still means killing all those other possibilities. It still means accepting your own finitude. It still means stepping onto one path and watching the others fade into the realm of the unlived. The usual response is to try desperately to find the right choice, the optimal path. You think, if I can just figure out which option is objectively the best one, then choosing won't feel like such a loss. So you research, you make pros and cons lists, you seek advice, you analyze and compare and calculate, trying to reduce the irreducible terror of choice to a simple matter of optimization. But this doesn't work because the question itself is wrong. There is no best choice in any objective sense. There's just the choice you make, and then the life that unfolds from that choice. Kierkegaard understood this too. In his work, Either or, he doesn't argue for one side or the other. He argues that the important thing is the choosing itself, the act of committing, not what you commit to. The anxiety comes from trying to choose perfectly rather than choosing at all. Now, you might think this sounds rather bleak or pessimistic. And you're right that it's not comforting in the way that motivational platitudes are comforting. I'm not going to tell you that you can have it all, or that every door you don't walk through will somehow remain open, or that you can do everything in time if you just try hard enough. Those are comfortable lies. The truth is harder. You will leave most of your potential unrealized. Most of the people you could have become will never exist. Most of the things you could have done will remain undone. But here's what nobody tells you. This isn't actually a tragedy. It's the condition of having a real life rather than an infinite number of imaginary ones. And there's something that emerges when you finally accept this and make a choice, something that can't exist in the realm of pure possibility. Let me tell you about someone I knew. For years, this person collected interests the way some people collect stamps. He taught himself the basics of music theory, started learning 3 different languages, got halfway through a computer programming course, bought supplies for half a dozen different hobbies, made elaborate plans for various business ventures and creative projects. His apartment was full of evidence of these scattered enthusiasms: a guitar with 2 broken strings, language textbooks with bookmarks stuck in the early chapters, art supplies still in their packaging. He wasn't doing nothing. He was doing a little bit of everything, keeping every possibility alive, but never going deep enough with any one thing to actually create something or become someone. He told himself he was exploring, keeping his options open, waiting to find his true calling. But as the years passed, something started to shift. He noticed that his friends who had chosen things, even things that seemed arbitrary or limiting, were developing depth. They were getting good at things. They were creating work that mattered to them. They were becoming specific kinds of people. Meanwhile, he remained possibility itself, which is another way of saying he remained nothing in particular. Then something happened that forced his hand. He lost his job. Suddenly he needed income, and he needed it relatively quickly. For the first time in years, he couldn't afford to keep all possibilities alive. He had to choose something, anything, and do it well enough to earn money. In a strange way, this limitation felt like relief. The burden of infinite choice was lifted. He looked at his scattered interests and asked a different question. Not, which of these is the best, but, which of these could I commit to right now, today, without looking back? He chose software development almost arbitrarily. It wasn't that programming was more important than music or languages or any of his other interests. It was just that he chose it, and then he committed to that choice the way you might commit to a marriage, not because it's perfect, but because you're choosing to make it your life. And something strange happened. Once he stopped trying to keep every other possibility alive, once he accepted that he was closing doors with every hour he spent coding, something began to grow. Not just skill, though he did get much better at programming, but something harder to name. A kind of depth, a kind of relationship with the work that couldn't exist when his attention was scattered across a dozen different pursuits. He began to see things that only become visible when you go deep rather than broad. Patterns that reveal themselves only after hundreds of hours of practice. Pleasures that only emerge once you push through the initial discomfort and actually become competent. And here's the strangest part. The choice that had felt like a death of possibilities began to feel like a birth of something real. This is what emerges when you stop trying to remain pure potential and accept the limitation of actual existence. It's not that the new state is better in some obvious way. It's not more exciting or more free. If anything, it's less exciting. There's no longer that electric feeling of infinite possibility, that sense that you could become anyone or do anything. Instead, there's something quieter and more substantial. There's the satisfaction of actually being someone, of developing a specific competence, of creating something that exists outside your own mind. It's not the excitement of standing at a crossroads looking at 100 glittering paths. It's the different kind of satisfaction of having walked far enough down one path that you can look back and see where you've been. The path itself has become familiar. You know its texture. You've weathered its difficulties. You've discovered things along the way that you couldn't see from the crossroads, subtle features of the landscape that reveal themselves only to those who commit to walking. And look, I'm not going to romanticize this. The other possibilities did die. There's a real loss there. The version of you that becomes a concert pianist. If you chose software development, that person won't exist. The version that travels the world, or starts a bakery, or becomes fluent in Japanese, those versions are gone. And you might mourn them sometimes, you might wonder about the roads not taken. But here's what you discover. Those other possibilities were never as real as they seemed. When you were standing at the crossroads, each path looked equally vivid, equally possible. But they were abstractions, fantasies, potential energies that never catalyzed into anything actual. The path you chose is real. It has dirt on it. It has scratches from branches. It has the weight of actual experience. And that realness, that actuality, has a quality that pure possibility can never have. So, what do you do in the meantime, while you're still caught in the paralysis? What do you do when you understand all this intellectually, but still feel the terror of choosing? Here's the paradox. You practice making small choices without expecting them to be the right ones. You pick something, almost anything, and you commit to it for a defined period of time, not forever, not as your life's purpose, just for now. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's a year. You tell yourself, I'm going to put my energy into this one thing, not because it's the best thing, but because it's the thing I'm choosing right now. And you watch what happens. You don't judge it. You don't constantly evaluate whether you made the right choice. You just observe how it feels to actually commit, to let other possibilities die, to accept limitation. And you stop certain things. You stop comparing your chosen path to the imaginary paths you didn't take. You stop fantasizing about how much better things would be if you'd chosen differently. You stop keeping one foot in the realm of pure possibility while tentatively stepping onto an actual path. Because this split attention is what maintains the paralysis. As long as you're simultaneously walking a path and fantasizing about other paths, you're not really committing to anything. You're still trying to keep everything alive. You're still refusing to accept your own finitude. Most importantly, you stop waiting for the choice to be easy or obvious. You stop waiting for a sign, for a calling, for absolute certainty. Because that's just another way of avoiding the responsibility of choosing. The point isn't to make a perfect choice. The point is to make any choice and then to commit to it fully enough that it becomes real. And paradoxically, it's only when you stop trying to keep all possibilities alive that you actually become capable of creating something valuable with one possibility. It's only when you accept the death of 1,000 potential selves that one actual self can fully come into being. Perhaps the reason you want to do everything but feel stuck is that you've outgrown the fantasy of being everything. Not because you're better or more enlightened, but because on some level, you're ready to trade the intoxication of infinite potential for the substance of finite actuality. You're ready to stop being 100 imaginary things and start being one real thing. But you're terrified of taking that step because it means admitting something you've been avoiding. You are not infinite. You are not going to become everything. You are going to become something specific, and that something will exclude most other possibilities. And then you're thrown back on the fundamental question that Kierkegaard knew we all face. What will you do with your one finite life? Not your infinite lives, not your potential lives, but this one actual life you're living right now. The question isn't which path is best. The question is which path will you walk? And the answer doesn't come from analysis or from waiting or from keeping your options open. It comes from choosing, from stepping onto a path, from accepting that choosing is simultaneously creation and destruction. And it's not nothing, that actual life you build by choosing. It's not less than those fantasies of infinite potential. It's something else entirely, something weightier and more strange, something that couldn't exist in the realm of pure possibility. You just forgot for a while that being something real means not being everything imaginary.